Tatsumaki and Gojo are literally one of the strongest characters in their respective verse. Both are treated as weapons that humanity chooses to use when it's absolutely necessary. Arrogance and cockiness are two distinctive qualities that both certainly possesses, thinking they could manage to defeat anybody anytime. This fight happens due to Kinjaku's master plan of pinning both against each other, with Kinjaku already being a Tsukiyomi member due to having the same forehead stitches, or maybe just say that Apollo is actually Kinjaku. It convinced Tatsumaki that Gojo is the actual leader of that organization and would leave no choice for her but to fight the honored one Satoru Gojo. In this video, we will compare both of their stats and see how their abilities would interact with each other to find out who is the strongest between the two. But before that, do not forget to damage the subscribe button and the notification bell for more of these matchup videos. Thank you. In a world filled with multiple overpowered monsters who trembles over different cities possessing different kinds of abilities, Tatsumaki, despite her being a human, is considered to be the monster above actual monsters, being the number 2 S-class hero who is considered to be the hero's strongest weapon due to blast being absent most of the time. Now, to have a general idea why a character who looks like a child is so frightening, let's first tackle into her overall abilities and see why she is a force to be reckoned with. Tatsumaki is an esper that can use telekinesis and psychokinetic powers, and to put it simply, she can lift, manipulate, and influence physical matter without any physical interactions. You see, these abilities, according to the data book, are the fruit of a divine realm that surpasses human knowledge, capable of moving all creation. This is obviously a hyperbole statement, since her abilities do not stretch to the extent of manipulating things such as galaxies or universes, as that would make her extremely OP compared to the other cast, something that the lore is definitely not suggesting. But even without that, there are numerous already applied abilities we've seen in the manga so far, such as resisting the gravity times 300 with literally zero effort, lifting the entirety of City Z upside down while extremely fatigued, complete awareness and senses over the battlefield, and obviously full control over any physical object she chooses to manipulate. However, the most impressive ability in my opinion that is also considered as durability in her part is certainly her psychokinetic barriers, capable of literally withstanding a continental slice. However, her barriers obviously are as strong as how much Tatsumaki wants them to be. Take for example Iain, who with multiple slashes was capable of destroying the barrier she set on him to protect him, which means that Tatsumaki needs to be focused all the time to make the barriers functions at a strong base. But if she doesn't and simply just gets distracted by something else, she'd definitely be susceptible to any type of attacks, which ultimately means that Tatsumaki's barriers are not passive, but more so she just needs to always keep focusing to maintain its functionality. You see, there are also other things that should be mentioned regarding how her abilities works, but I find it best to explain them when we eventually talk about how their abilities would interact with each other. Now, since we got her abilities out of the way, let's now tackle into her general stats. How strong and fast can Tatsumaki be? You see, there are different metas regarding speed in One Punch Man. You can either choose to include Janus early on in the series, dodging lasers that were confirmed to possess the properties of light, or maybe rely on Awakened Cockroach, who literally stated he can move and react to the speed of light. He eventually got blessed by Orochi's horn, who Tatsumaki, by the author's statements and what we've seen in the manga, definitely scales above. You can also simply just use the latest Tatsumaki feats, of which she reacted to Sonic, who is somehow relative to suppressed Flashy Flash, and even bested in not even trying Saitama in saving multiple citizens in their fights. Pay in mind that this feat is actually impressive, since Saitama with her in his last training stages was already faster than light. In all of these cases, Tatsumaki should comfortably sit at faster than light to faster than light plus levels of speed. Now, regarding how strong Tatsumaki can be, the easiest way to determine that is obviously with using her feat of tanking and eventually stopping Psycho Orochi's beam while being extremely fatigued. This by itself puts her at a multi-continental level of force, but since Tatsumaki is established managed to be above Orochi, she should be placed above his Gaia cannon that certainly packs a small planet level of destructiveness. This doesn't seem far-fetched since Tatsumaki, even when she is heavily fatigued, as soon as she regained her focus, she stopped a continental beam with ease. She wasn't actually worried about the magnitude of that attack targeted towards her, but more so just worried about the consequences of what would happen to others if Psycho Orochi beams lands on the surface. That's how much of a beast she is, which means that Tatsumaki should hold small planet level of force and faster than light to faster than light plus levels of speed. With all of this being said, how would she fare up against the honored one Satoru Gojo? Satoru Gojo is hailed as the strongest modern sorcerer in the verse, considered to be the best life force in the planet, so much so that he is currently being used as a weapon even after his death. Being born as a special individual, possessing both the 6 eyes and the limitless technique that essentially allows him to bring the concept of infinity into reality, manipulating and distorting space at will. Now it's very important to understand that his technique actually abides to the rules of our actual physics and science, rather than just being something that imitates actual infinity. And to oversimplify its concept for a basic understanding, let's take a look at one of Zeno's paradoxes, which is the paradox of Achilles and the tortoise. In this paradox, Zeno argues that a swift runner like Achilles cannot overtake a slower moving tortoise with a head start, and that's due to the distance between them would always be infinitely subdivided, implying Achilles would require an infinite number of steps to catch the tortoise, which means that Satoru Gojo's infinity act as the ultimate passive shield that would automatically guard him against any type of attack. He also has access to blue, an ability that allows him to force matter to be pulled in a negative space, and red is essentially the reverse application of blue, which causes an extremely repulsive force that repels all matter in that specific area. And when he collides both of them, he creates an imaginary mass called purple that annihilates anything it comes in contact with. However, there exists a common belief that purple can actually erase matter, which means that it should hold some sort of durability negation. This unfortunately is never stated in the manga, but more so just something the fans assumed he can manage to do. Now, the last two things I should be mentioning regarding his abilities are his usage of reverse curse technique and his domain expansion. Both of these applications are considered to be highly advanced and very few people are capable of performing them, but Gojo's domain expansion is literally broken. As soon as he uses Unlimited Void, which activates instantly, his opponent would just be paralyzed due to receiving endless unlimited information that would leave him susceptible to any type of attack Gojo chooses to perform. Essentially, once you get caught in it, it's literally impossible to escape. And with the reverse curse technique, it allows him to heal and regenerate even a lost limb if he wants to, as long as he does not run out of cursed energy. Alright, now that we have talked about all of his relevant abilities, let's now tackle into his physical stats. You see, when it comes to both attack potency and speed, the power scaling community seems to vastly struggle to choose one definitive line of scaling due to the ambiguity of certain feats. And if you are familiar with this channel, I personally think that faster than light and planetary meta for JJK is absolutely a clear wank and out of context. Even if you say that Kashimon's electromagnetic waves moves at the speed of light, Sukuna actually reacted to the charge of that technique, not the actual attack. Furthermore, both Sukuna and Kashimo were eventually hit by lightning and couldn't even react to it just after that feat. In that case, the best way to come up with a number for their speed is with using Hakari dodging lightning that puts him at massively hypersonic plus. And when it comes to attack potency, planetary comes from Yuki's Tsukumo's black hole that was indeed about to destroy the world. However, that does not mean that Sukuna and Gojo scales to it simply because they are stronger than Yuki. And even Yuki doesn't scale to it in base, but more so is just a last resort attack with exerting all of her energy at once. This would be one of the cases of destructive capacity not equaling casual attack potency. But if we don't take this meta alongside with creation feat equaling attack potency, then Satoru Gojo should scale from large city to maybe island if you want to be generous. And when it comes to speed, massively hypersonic plus 2 relativistic should be his peak of combat and movement speed. But nonetheless, similar to the other videos I have made including JJK characters, we would be including the faster than light meta in this matchup. With all of this being said, how would Gojo deal with Tornado of Terror Tatsumaki? Now, it's very self-explanatory how the One Punch Man verse vastly outscales the JJK verse in so many regards. You have characters like Genos being capable of leveling up a mountaintop with relative ease way early on in the series. But in all fairness, Jujutsu Kaisen also holds very impressive abilities and hacks that should be completely troublesome to many characters in One Punch Man. Best examples of that are Mahito's idol transfiguration and Gojo's infinity. But nonetheless, let's first establish who has the upper hand regarding attack potency and speed. Now, Satoru Gojo, as I explained before, even if highballed without using Yuki's ability, would be at island level of attack potency, and that's with us being extremely generous, while Tatsumaki on the other hand sits comfortably at multi-continental to small planet level via logical scaling. And even if you want to highball his speed to the extreme limits and say that he is light speed and maybe faster, Tatsumaki outscales a character who blitzed a monster who claimed he can move and react at the speed of light. Not to mention that that's just one of the many lines of scaling that certainly places her at this particular level. All of this should indicate that when it comes to the attack potency, destructive capacity and speed department, Gojo is pretty lacking compared to Tatsumaki. But you see, the main contention regarding this matchup lies in Gojo's being completely unaffected to outside attacks. He is completely invincible and just cannot be hit by any attack that travels towards him. So in this regard, the proper question that needs to be answered is, can Tatsumaki with her telekinesis and psychokinetic abilities bypass Gojo's infinity? How would these two abilities interact with each other? Now, I can say for sure that if you want to go about this using Tatsumaki from the webcomics, then she can definitely not be able to bypass Gojo's infinity. As explained in chapter 77 of the webcomics, psychics in One Punch Man uses waves that travels to the object they want to control, which means as long as they travel, they would not be able to bypass infinity since the waves would require an infinite number of steps to reach Gojo. But to be completely fair, it is very unclear how Tatsumaki uses her powers in the actual manga, since this whole explanation was not included in the new source material, which could be argued to be left out for a reason. However, there are many evidence that leads towards the belief that Tatsumaki's psychic abilities do not travel but simply just spawn whenever she senses her opponents or any particular object. You see, in chapter 137, Tatsumaki saved many heroes by simply putting a barrier around them when she sensed the terminal device they were holding. But despite the device being in Pig God's pocket, who was literally eaten by Gums, the barrier was not formed on Gums but rather just Pig God, which means the waves were not traveling but simply spawned on Pig God. With this, Gojo would be susceptible to Tatsumaki's telekinesis and therefore she can bypass his infinity. She can literally crush his heart from the inside if she ever wanted to, leaving only one possible option for Gojo, which is trapping Tatsumaki inside a domain expansion. This would indeed give the dub for Gojo since there are no factual evidence that suggests she can resist unlimited void, and it's very safe to assume that as soon as she is trapped inside his domain, there would be absolutely nothing she can do. But you see, the problem with this is that Tatsumaki is clearly superior to him in terms of speed. She can simply stop him before he performs it or just leave the range as quickly as possible. Even if he teleports to her, she still has the superior speed to counter him instantly. She can also sense where he is if he chooses to catch her off guard using his teleportation. Bottom line, Tatsumaki would only be caught if she allows herself to be caught, underestimating him and thinking that his ability would do her no harm, same as allowing Evil Eye to perform his tornado attack. In any case, Tatsumaki should have the lead if she doesn't underestimate him, and this would not be close. However, if her psychic abilities do indeed travel and they do not spawn on the target, then she would certainly have no possible way of bypassing infinity, which would eventually lead to a stalemate. Neither him or her can hurt each other, she cannot damage him, and he cannot attack her due to the speed difference. But in all fairness, he'd still have one win condition over her, and she would have none. And if he coordinates his attacks carefully and traps her in a domain expansion, which is a big if, he would be the last one standing. Now, to sum up everything, Tatsumaki should win if her abilities do not travel and simply just spawn on the target as suggested in the manga. She is literally superior in every regard, and this would not be close. But if you choose to go by the webcomics, Tatsumaki would not be able to defeat him, leaving him with one win condition that could eventually take her out if planned correctly. Despite the clear difference in speed and strength, it would be pointless if she cannot bypass infinity, which means she either wins easily, loses somehow to domain expansion if she gets arrogant and cocky, or this matchup would just not have a verdict due to it being a clear stalemate. Other than that, thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time, please take good care.